Welcome everybody to Walk Through the Psalms Week 4. Today we're going to be looking at Mizmor Hey, or Psalm 5. And as has been our practice so far, before we get into the psalm and its spiritual application, just a little bit of historical background. Although not specifically mentioned, it is believed that this psalm continues chronologically from the previous two psalms, which were written while King David was fleeing his son Absalom. Whereas in Psalm 4, David addressed the people who were following Absalom and the architect of his deceit, Ahithophel. And I have not yet brought him into the picture. So far, I've simply talked about this architect of the deceit that Absalom was committing against his father, but I have not mentioned him. Ahithophel had been a counselor to King David, but deserted the king in order to promote Absalom's rebellion and presumably earn himself a place in the new court. Ahithophel had been overlooked many times during the reign of the king, and it's believed, based on a passage indicating that Ahithophel's son and Bathsheba's father have the same name. So it's assumed that Ahithophel was Bathsheba's grandfather, which gives us an interesting perspective on his choice to promote Absalom's theft of the throne. In this scenario, it's quite likely that Ahithophel had an axe to grind with the king and found this the perfect opportunity. By helping Absalom to steal the throne from David and thus Solomon, he was getting revenge against the king for having stolen his granddaughter and, of course, produced what he would have probably considered an illegitimate child. The complexity of the scheme aside, Ahithophel's advice was not completely followed, and when he realized that the plan was doomed to failure, he ended up hanging himself. As is the case with previous two psalms, and will be the case with all the psalms that have a title on them, the verse numbering between the Jewish and Christian Bibles is off by one. Now let's take a look at the psalm. To the conductor on the Nechilot, a song of David. Give ear to my words, O Lord, consider my meditation. Hearken to the voice of my cry, my King and my God, for I will pray to you. O Lord, in the morning you shall hearken to my voice. In the morning I shall arrange my prayer to you, and I shall look forward. For you are not a God who desires wickedness, and evil does not abide with you. Confused people or boasters shall not stand before your eyes. You hate all workers of iniquity. You destroy speakers of lies. The Lord abhors a man of blood and deceit. But I, with your great loving kindness, shall enter your house. I shall prostrate myself toward your holy temple in the fear of you. O Lord, lead me to your righteousness because of those who lie in wait for me. Make your way straight before me. For there is no sincerity in his mouth. There is malice in their heart. Their throat is an open grave. They make their tongues smooth. Condemn them, O God. Let them fall by their own counsels. Cast them down in the multitude of their transgressions, for they have rebelled against you. And let all who take refuge in you rejoice. May they ever shout for joy, and you shall shelter them. And let all who love your name exult in you. For you, O Lord, shall bless the righteous. You shall encompass him like a shield. As in the previous psalm, this psalm starts out with the phrase Lemenatzeach, which we noted last week means that David had every intention of the words contained within this psalm to be sung in the temple and to be inspirational for all the Jewish people and as an application for generations to come. The second word is al-hanchilot, which is understood to be a musical instrument of some sort. There are several such references in the Psalms, and although the exact meaning and type of each instrument became lost to us over time, the type of instrument, or at least the sound, can be inferred based on the name. Rashi explains that each psalm had a unique musical accompaniment which complemented the mood of the song and helped to convey the message that was contained within it. The word nechilot is similar to a couple of different words in Hebrew. The Radak suggests that the instrument's name is similar to the word nechil, which literally means a swarm of bees. He explains that this instrument would have produced a swarming sound like the droning of bees. Now, I'm not sure if that's the same thing as the droning of a bagpipe, because none of the Meforshim, none of the commentators made reference to that. But if it's anything like the droning of a bagpipe, I'm not interested. Thank you very much. But the effect could easily have been produced by the quick strumming of strings, unlike the bagpipe, which is produced by blowing air. This explanation makes sense considering the context of the psalm, a time when David was under attack, and the droning sound of a swarm of bees would give one the sense of this concept of an oncoming attack. Verse 2 says, "Give ear to my words, O Lord, perceive my meditations." David here is asking God to hear the words that he is speaking, his supplications, but also that which remains unsaid. Sometimes, in times of great distress, there is so much that the heart and soul know, but which cannot be verbally expressed. The word here that's translated as perceive is the word bina, which has to do with perception and discernment. In Jewish thought, there are three different types of thinking or knowledge. They are called chachma, which is often translated as wisdom, bina, which is often translated as intuition, and dat, which is often translated as knowledge. While chachma is insight or conception, it represents an understanding that is undeveloped. It's like that spark of light, like the light bulb turning on, you know? It exposes the most basic fundamental truth in a situation, whereas bina is often referred to as women's intuition or instinct. Bina is the next step. It's the development and elucidation of the basic concept that Chachma has brought to light. It is understanding at a deep level. It's full of details, but in a nuanced way. So what David is asking God for is a nuanced, deep understanding and insight to who David really is and what he really wants, what he dreams about, what he meditates on, which, if Psalm 1 was any indication, is probably God's law. How many of us can truly say that we want God to hear our prayers, but also to probe the depths of our hearts, our deepest desires? There are definitely times when I don't feel that way. To also hear that which our mouth cannot express. Most of us are probably ashamed of some of the things that we think about, muse about on a regular basis. And yet, David boldly asks, begs even, that God would dig deeply and know in that way that only God can know, his heart. These are the words of a man who loves God and Torah intensely and trusts in him fully and has completely surrendered to God's will. He's asking God, hear my prayers, answer my prayers, but also look at my unsaid words, the deepest desires of my heart, and honor those too. Verse 3 says, heed the sound of my outcry, my King and my God, for to you I pray. The word translated here as heed, hakshiva, is a more intensive form of listening, more intense than ha'azina, give ear, which was in the first verse. He's saying basically, even when I am far away and my cry is barely audible, hakshiva is active listening with a desire to hear more. It's listening with when true interest has been aroused. David here is asking God, when I can voice my prayers, hear them. And when I can't voice my prayers because of fears or worries or whatever else is stopping me from expressing myself and my desires, probe my heart and hear the prayer that goes unspoken. And when I'm far away and I'm having trouble drawing near, able to express my prayers, but they're barely reaching you, throw me a lifeline and bring me close. Listen to what my words really mean, even if they're barely audible. David is speaking for all of us. How many times do we need God to answer our prayer, but we don't even know what to pray? Or we know what we need in concept, but are incapable of putting words to the ideas. This is the psalm for one who is so distressed that all he knows is that he needs God to hear his prayer. When grief or fear or worry has overtaken you and there are no words left, these are the words. This is the psalm for you. Continuing in verse 3, David says, "Hear the sound of my outcry, my King and my God." Why does David address God as both God and King? To address God is to acknowledge that he is the creator of all, including you. It's to acknowledge that there is a judge and there is a standard. And it is to appeal to the judge as the one who can rescue from false accusers. To address God as king, on the other hand, is to cry out as a servant to his master. David is clearly in distress, and for lack of a better term, he's covering all his bases. He is appealing to God to hear his spoken words, to perceive his unspoken words, and to listen intently to his barely spoken words. And now he says, "I appeal to you as the creator of all, and the one who knows me and knows my frailties, the one who has my very existence in his hands. And I also appeal to you as king, powerful ruler who can defeat the enemy in a moment's notice." Remember, he's still on the run. "And it is to you alone I pray. I'm not looking for another savior, for there is none other that can save." He's saying that as God and King, there is no other being in existence who cares enough to watch over my life, to be active in my life. And only you, only God, has the divine power to alter the events of his existence. The addition of the phrase, "to you alone I pray," according to the commentator Jose David, King David is saying, of course, I do not deserve this kindness, but take pity on me by virtue of the fact that it is to you alone that I pray. Verse 4 says, "O Lord, in the morning you will hear my voice. In the morning I will prepare myself and wait hopefully." When we make the very first act of our day prayer to God, we're making the statement that God is the absolute priority in our lives. It's so hard to get up in the morning. Trust me, I know. And it's even harder to get up an extra half an hour or an hour early in order to devote that time to prayer. But it is that very act that says, "I have put you and my service to you first in my life." By stating that God is foremost in his life, David can hope confidently that his needs and his concerns are also a priority for God. I have to stop and tell you that the times in my life I've had the most energy and the most success has been those times in my life when I have consistently made prayer in the morning a priority. Like I said, it's not easy, and no one is saying that it is, but it's one of those activities that has this intangible effect on everything else in your life. I would challenge you today, if you're not already saying the Modeh Ani prayer every morning when you wake up, make up your mind to begin doing that. In fact, do it right now. If you're not Jewish, that's okay. You don't have to say it in Hebrew, and you don't have to say the exact formulation. Just stop and say, "You know what, God? I rushed headlong into my day and forgot to stop and thank you. Thank you that you have woken me up to serve you another day. Thank you that you have reconfirmed your faith in me, that you want me to exist in this world, which means that I have a job to do today. Thank you." If you are Jewish and you want to say the Modeh Ani prayer and you are not already doing it, here it is for you. We have it in the Hebrew here, and we have it transliterated, and we have the translation. The Hebrew says, Moda ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shehechazarta bi nishmati bechemla rabba emunatecha. I gratefully thank you, O living and eternal King, for you have returned my soul within me with compassion. Abundant is your faithfulness. If you're already saying the Moda ani or something similar when you wake up, consider taking it to the next level. If you're Jewish, start saying morning brachot, the morning blessings. If you're Jewish and don't know what that is, be in touch with me by email or Facebook, and I'll be glad to help you with that. If you aren't Jewish, make up your mind to stop each morning after you've gotten dressed to meditate on God's goodness and to thank Him for all that He's given to you and to pray for others and then yourself. Taking half an hour each morning to do this sets the tone for the entire day, and I guarantee it will revolutionize your life. So after David says that in the morning he will speak to God and prepare himself, what does he mean? What does that mean, that he will prepare himself? Well, if you're going to talk to God, you have to prepare yourself to do so. It's not appropriate, except for in cases of emergency, to approach God casually. And actually, there's several places in the Torah where it specifically says that we shall not approach God casually or lightly. One should make sure that one is completely dressed and ready physically and mentally to approach the King. There are a lot of people who won't consume any food or drink before they pray, but I think that if you need to have a cup of coffee in order to be able to pray to God with your mind where it's supposed to be, with your brain engaged, then have the coffee first. If you were given a special appointment to meet with the president or your senator or whoever you really, really respect, it's a little dodgy saying the president right now, but you know what I'm trying to say, the Queen of England, would you just jump out of bed, throw on some flip-flops and head out the door? Not usually. When I had a meeting with some Knesset members last winter, I spent 2 days deciding what I was going to wear for the meeting. I thought long and hard about what image I wanted to present and how to look respectable enough to be taken seriously, but also that those I was meeting with should know that I also had respect for their time. And the morning of my meeting, you better believe I got up extra early to make sure that everything was just so. How many of us put that much preparation and thought into getting up in the morning to stand before our King and Maker? Now, I'm not saying that one has to go to such lengths every day, although maybe we should. Why is a human more deserving of such effort than God? That's really something to think about, isn't it? And then another way of looking at David's statement that he prepares himself really goes hand in glove with the following statement, that he will wait hopefully. And it's this idea of expecting that God, who is faithful, will answer the prayers and fully. It's the anticipation that something great is about to happen. When we pray to God, part of prayer is the anticipation that it will be answered. Prayer is always answered. And I'm sure that most of you have probably heard this idea that God always answers prayer. It's just that sometimes he answers yes, sometimes he answers no, and sometimes he answers not yet or wait. I can tell you that leaves me no comfort. I have had people say that to me, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, if God is answering no, well, it's nice that he's answering me, but it's not the answer that I want, right? But there's nothing wrong with anticipating that he's going to answer yes. Sometimes what is needed, though, is that we need to make room for the arrival of the thing that we are praying for. Sometimes our minds, our hearts, and our lives are so crowded with all the worries and stuff we stuff into our lives, there's no room for anything else. It's kind of like my closet. I have so much stuff hanging in my closet that if my husband said, let's go out and buy you some new clothes, well, first of all, I'd pass out. But after that, I'd either have to buy an additional closet or I'd first have to get rid of some stuff to make room for the new stuff because there's just no room for it. I have to make the space. It's like an interesting story that I once heard. There was a woman, she was getting on a little bit in age, and she went to the rabbi and she said, Rabbi, I really want to get married. I've never been married, but you know, I'm starting to get older and I need a blessing from you. I really want to find my soulmate. I really want to get married. So the rabbi started asking her these questions, very odd questions, she thought. He said, in your closet, he said, do your clothes take up the whole closet? And she said, yes. And he said, I want you to go home and I want you to do whatever you have to do to make it so that your clothes only take up half the closet. I want you to make space for the clothes of the man you're going to marry. He said, and your car, and your garage. Is your garage a one-car garage or a two-car garage? She said, it's a two-car garage. He said, where do you park your car? She said, in the middle. He said to her, I want you to go home, and from now on, I want you to start parking your car on one side of the garage, leaving room for a second car. If you have to clean it up or whatever, go ahead and do that, but leave space for the car of the man you're going to marry. He said, now, what about your bed? Do you have a single bed or a double bed? She said, I have a double bed. He said, do you sleep on one side of the bed or do you sleep in the middle? She said, I sleep in the middle. He said, from now on, I want you to sleep on one side of the bed. I want you to give space for the man that you're going to marry. So the woman went home and she followed the directions of the rabbi, and within 6 months, she had found the man that she was going to marry. So sometimes we just need to make space for the things that we want from God, because we have so much other stuff that it crowds out the space and there's no space for God to bless us. When we ask God for something, we need to make space for it to happen. Otherwise, where are you going to put it? Part of making space is creating it, literally, and by expecting that it's going to happen, knowing that it's going to happen. So David here is saying, I'm preparing myself for you to come through, and I wait in hopeful anticipation at the miracles you're going to perform for me today. Okay, moving on to verse 5. It says, for you are not a God who desires wickedness. Evil does not abide with you. David's confidence is based on an intimate understanding of who God is. In fact, that is the very definition of faith in Judaism. Faith is not blind. It's a trust based on past experience. It's precisely because of who God has shown himself to be that we can trust in him and have the faith that he's got our best interests at heart. I liken faith to sitting in a chair. Think about it. When you sit down in a chair, right? You look at the chair and your brain, your neurons in your brain say, chair, I know what that is. I've sat in a chair a million times before. I put my weight into the chair and the chair holds me. Of course, if you've ever had an experience like I have where the chair actually collapsed underneath you, you might be a little bit more cautious sometimes. But the point is that we know that most chairs will hold our weight. So we walk up to a chair and we notice the chair and we notice that it's the type of chair, or it is a chair that we've sat in a million times, and we sit down in the chair. God doesn't act like the people that have been after David. He doesn't tell lies. He doesn't scheme for power. He doesn't plot to overthrow people for material wealth. There's no desire for anything but pure, raw truth. And it's because of the fact that there is no wickedness, no evil in God, that David can all the more hope expectantly that God will overthrow the wicked and their plans. Not only because he's not wicked, but because in the end, evil and those who commit it will ultimately be destroyed. Verses 6 and 7 continue. Confused people shall not stand before your eyes. You hate all workers of iniquity. You destroy speakers of lies. The Lord abhors a man of blood and deceit. Now, it's interesting because the word that's translated in this version here as confused people sometimes is also translated as the boastful, and that's probably a more accurate translation. The word is holalim, and it's thought to be specifically referencing Doeg and Achitophel, the two architects and executioners of the evil plot against David. But of course, in the bigger picture, it refers to anyone who tries to circumvent God's will through scheming and treachery. According to the Mishnah, they are called confused and disoriented. With no moral compass to guide them, they're wild, and in them there is no stability, and they cannot stand firm in the presence of God, who is the ultimate truth. We can take heart in the knowledge that when we're being pursued by an enemy, we have the ultimate judge on our side, who is all truth and in whose presence the enemy cannot stand. Continuing, it says, you destroy speakers of lies. The word destroy is very interesting. It is ta'aved, which comes from the same root as the word avad, to lose. When something is lost, it's not destroyed completely. There's always a chance that it will come back, which kind of hints towards that theme that we've been seeing David do throughout the first handful of Psalms. And that is this idea that there's always hope, that even the most evil people, what did David do? He didn't ask God to destroy them. He asked God to destroy their plans, but he asked them and he appealed to them directly to come back to the way, to get back on the right path, to come back to God. So there are no guarantees, obviously. Something that is lost or has wandered away may or may not be found. The form of the word is in the imperative. It's like a request saying, chase away the speakers of deception. Again, David's not asking God to destroy them. He's just asking him to lose them for a little while. After all, he points out that the man who is bloodthirsty and deceitful, God abhors. Now, in verse 8, David returns his focus to his gratitude to Hashem. As for me, through your abundant kindness, I will enter your house. I will bow in reverence to your holy sanctuary, in awe of you. David just got finished asking God to send the wicked, right, as Leah pointed out, to ask them to get lost. Those who speak lies, who are bloodthirsty and deceitful, far away from him, because God abhors such people. But it is in my yearning for your presence and through your great kindness, because let's face it, even the man who desires God with all that he is, who meditates on the Torah, who loves the truth, who makes God his first priority, still does not gain closeness to God because of his deeds. In the end, it really only boils down to God's great kindness that even such a person might merit to be drawn close to God. And I think that's really important for us. If David himself is saying, look, I need your kindness to draw close to you, then we can trust also, even though we fall far shorter, most of us, than King David did in accomplishing righteousness, that because of who God is and because of his great kindness, we can ask, we can beg, really, I was going to use the word entreaty, him to use his kindness to bring us closer to him. All right? And remember that much like those who live today and do not have a temple to go to feel God's presence in a tangible way, David was on the run. He did not have access to the tabernacle. Remember at that time, the temple had not yet been rebuilt. Okay, so the tabernacle is what was standing at that time, but still he was on the run, and he recognized that it was only through God's abundant kindness that he would merit to worship him there once again. This should be our prayer each day, that God in his mercy would bring us close to his presence, that we would know and feel his presence in a tangible way in our life, but also that he would chase away our enemies who are bloodthirsty, lying, deceitful men, and through his great mercy and kindness, allow us to once again enter his temple and worship towards his holy sanctuary. This is a prayer that we should be praying each and every day until we have that temple. He ends the verse with the phrase, in awe of you. The Malbim contrasts David's attitude with those who do not fear God. The idol worshiper visits his temple only when gripped by fear, lest he be punished by the wrath of his deity, right? He enters in fear, and then he looks at these idols, which are made of stone. His fear kind of subsides, and he hopes that maybe his idols can rescue him. But the exact opposite is true with the one who worships God. With God, the worshiper enters the temple out of love and a yearning for God's kindness. He sees the love of God in every facet of creation and so draws close to the Creator. Then, once he's entered the presence of God, he's hit with the awesomeness of God, his greatness, and he begins to tremble. Thus says the Rambam, pagan terror evaporates into indifference, whereas Jewish love amplifies itself into mighty awe. Verse 9, O Lord, lead me in your righteousness because of my watchful enemies. Make your way straight before me. David has just finished contrasting his way with the way of the unrighteous. But then he realizes that he too could stumble. So in a sincere moment of humility, David asks God to guide him on the right path. He knows himself. He knows that he himself is only a step away from falling, and his enemies wait, watching, ready to pounce on him the moment he falls. Please, God, don't let me fall, but only lead me in your righteousness. Clear the path that lies before me so that there are no stumbling blocks, no little stones for me to trip over. Part of our prayer to God must always be that he will lead us in the right path, that he'll give us clarity. I don't know about you, but I pray for clarity on a regular basis. This world is not always clear. In fact, it's usually not. Things are not always black and white. Not only is not every decision a clear-cut one, right? There are so many issues that have nuances and gray areas, but the right decision is not always clear either. We need to remember to ask God to take the things out of our path that will cause us to stumble so that we could proceed unhindered in the way we should go, in the work that he has. Because truth be told, it only takes one misstep and the enemy will be on us like ants on a lollipop. So then he goes on, he says in verse 10, for there is no sincerity in his mouth, there is malice in his heart, their throat is an open grave, for they speak with a smooth tongue. In the previous verse, David asked God to lead him because of his watchful enemies, who in this verse it's explained, speak lies. They only have bad intentions, and he could very easily be fooled into falling into their deception. The words they speak being a very dangerous trap, like an open grave, he says. We know that in Judaism, the laws of Lashon Hara, or what we call negative speech, are very strict. The reason for this is because of the power of the tongue. God created us with the power to create through our speech. That's one of the ways in which we are made in the image of God. But unfortunately, there are always two sides to a coin. The same ability to create good in the world, to create vessels for blessing, also has the capacity to create evil and to bring about death and destruction. How many lives have been destroyed because of words carelessly spoken, either by the victim or by others? Those who do not fear God, who do not follow in his ways, do not speak the truth, and their motivation is only malice. The words they speak are a trap for us. We too must be very cautious and ask God to lead us in his clear path so that we don't stumble from the words of those for whom there is no righteousness. It can be very easy to fall into a conversation that descends into gossip. It starts out as an innocent comment about someone and becomes a bottomless pit in no time, consuming everyone within earshot. David finishes the psalm by asking God to bring them to justice. He says, condemn them, O God, let them fall by their own counsels. Cast them down in the multitude of their transgressions, for they have rebelled against you. He's not actually asking God to destroy them, which again is an interesting insight into who King David was. He knows that their own deeds will cause their destruction. All he has to do is ask God to bring about justice. Put them on trial and they'll hang themselves, he's saying. David knows that in the end, the light of God's truth will expose all evil deeds and the truth will come out. When that happens, the evil condemn themselves. This is akin to what we can expect to happen to us in the final judgment. It is said that hell, which Judaism teaches is not a place but a process, is actually that moment or moments when our life is played before our eyes and we suddenly become completely aware of how we have lived. Our own deeds condemn us. God needs do nothing except expose our deeds to the light of the truth, and we will suffer unmentionable pain as we experience the reality of how we have lived our lives or not lived our lives, how we've wasted our lives. And although all of us will stand at that place, David finishes up with a beautiful thought that should bring us all comfort. He says in verses 12 and 13, "And let all who take refuge in you rejoice. May they ever shout for joy, and you shall shelter them. And let all who love you exalt your name, who love your name exult in you. For you, O Lord, shall bless the righteous. You shall encompass him like a shield." In the end, the ones who have taken refuge in God will be glad, and they will rejoice forever. And it says that he will shelter them. The word for shelter here is related to the word skach, which is the roof that is placed on a sukkah. It's a covering which makes shade. The idea is that there is not so much a protection as a relief. When you find shade to stand under in the heat of a sunny day, it's so refreshing. It can bring such joy. In the end, when the righteous are faced with the truth of what they could have been and how they lived their lives, they can't be protected from that. That truth must be faced. But even though they must face that truth, they will receive relief. They will gain a covering that provides blessed shade, and they will rejoice because of God's goodness forever. The last verse says that the Lord will encompass the righteous like a shield. This particular word, katsina, is a shield that provides protection to its bearers from three sides. As long as the bearer is facing the enemy head on, he is fully and completely protected. It's only if he should try to retreat that he will be exposed, because his back is exposed. We need to live life head on. Life is supposed to be lived head on. We face the enemy full face, and as long as we seek God and try to follow his ways, repent when we fall, he provides us with a shield that will protect us. Keep moving forward. Seek God. Follow his ways. Don't turn back and run, and you will have protection. I hope you got a lot out of this psalm. I find this is now my favorite psalm until I reach the next favorite one, I think. This psalm has so much that speaks to us. This psalm has so much that we could just say it as is, read it, and that's really the whole point, is that to find the psalms that speak to us so that in that moment when, as David said at the beginning of the psalm, we can't even find the words to pray, he's already put them down on paper for us. All we have to do is use his words, and they will speak what's in our heart for us. So this is one of those psalms that I think brings a great amount of comfort, even to those of us who maybe we're not so righteous, but we're trying, and to acknowledge that really that's not what saves us anyway. It's God's kindness that does. And these words will put words in our mouth to talk to God, to ask him to give us that loving kindness, and to be like a shield on three sides of us so that as we face life headlong, face forward, that we will be protected, and that in the end, even though we will have to face our deeds, we'll have to face how we lived our lives, he will provide that skach, that shelter, that blessed relief for us, and we'll be able to praise him all of our days for eternity. Thank you so much for joining me. I wanted to just reiterate one more time. I know that people are probably getting a little tired of hearing it, but it's not too late for people to join the class. If you know of somebody who you think might get a lot out of this, please share with them. You can send them to PeninaTaylor.com to events and then walk through the Psalms, and they can register and they'll get links to all of the previous videos that we've done so far, and they'll be able to join the live classes with us next month. Well, actually, once they're registered, they can begin watching the live classes. So either send them there, or one better, click on the link below, which will take you to PeninaTaylor.com/event/walk through the Psalms, and register your friend and give them a gift subscription for the first month. And say, happy birthday, happy anniversary, whatever, happy Hanukkah. Here's a gift for you. And give them a gift that really matters and that hopefully will really transform their lives. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Penina Taylor. I look forward to seeing you next week.